Part 1. The Body in the Desert. The desert wind uncovered the body before anyone was supposed to find it. A group of geology students from the University of Nevada had come to the abandoned mining area near the California-Nevada border in the spring of 1974. One of them noticed something pale sticking out of the sand between the rocks. At first, he thought it was animal bones. Then he saw the boot. The sheriff's department arrived 2 hours later. The body belonged to a young man in his early 20s. His clothes were worn, dusty, the kind travelers wore when they had been on the road for weeks. There was no wallet, no ID, no bag, only a cheap leather bracelet on his wrist and a faded denim jacket. The coroner would later confirm what everyone suspected. Hitchhiker. In the 1970s, hitchhiking was common across America. Thousands of young travelers moved from state to state with nothing but backpacks and cardboard signs. Most reached their destinations. Some didn't. What nobody yet realized was that the desert had already swallowed several more. 3 months earlier, a green camper van rolled slowly along Highway 95 under the burning California sun. Inside sat Dorian Hale, a tall man with narrow shoulders and calm gray eyes. He looked like the type of man nobody remembered after meeting. His brown hair was always neatly combed, his voice soft, controlled. Next to him sat his wife, Maribel Ortega Hale. Maribel had sharp dark eyes and long black hair tied loosely behind her head. She smoked constantly, flicking ash out of the open van window as the desert landscape slid by. They looked like any ordinary couple traveling across America. They were not. Dorian liked the highways. He liked the silence of long desert roads and the small figures standing near them with cardboard signs. People who were alone. People who would disappear quietly. Up ahead, a young man stood near the roadside with his thumb out. His backpack rested at his feet. A cardboard sign read, Las Vegas. Dorian slowed the van. Maribel glanced at him and smiled slightly. "You're thinking about it again," she said. Dorian kept his eyes on the road. "He chose to stand there," he replied calmly. The van rolled to a stop. The hitchhiker leaned down to the window, relieved. "Vegas?" he asked. "Sure," Dorian said warmly. "Hop in." The young man climbed into the back of the camper van, thanking them repeatedly. He introduced himself as Ethan Crowley, a college student traveling across the country before starting a job in Arizona. Dorian listened politely while driving deeper into the desert. Maribel barely spoke. She simply watched the road behind them. 30 minutes later, Dorian turned off the highway. Ethan leaned forward from the back seat. "Hey, is this the way?" "No," Dorian said quietly. The van stopped near a narrow dirt road leading toward the abandoned mining hills. For a moment, the desert was completely silent. Then Maribel reached under her seat. By the time Ethan realized something was wrong, it was already too late. 2 days later, the green camper van continued south as if nothing had happened. Behind them, somewhere in the empty desert hills, the first body was already disappearing beneath the sand. And it would not be the last. Part 2. The Road Selects the Lost. By the end of the summer of 1974, 3 more people had vanished along the highways stretching across California and Nevada. At the time, no one connected the disappearances. Hitchhikers came and went constantly. Some left no contact information. Others had cut ties with their families. Police departments were used to missing person reports that never led anywhere. But the desert remembered everything. In August, the green camper van rolled through a lonely stretch of Highway 6. Dorian Hale kept one hand lightly on the steering wheel. Maribel sat with her feet on the dashboard, flipping through a worn road atlas. "Next town is 90 miles, she said. Dorian nodded. "That's good." They both knew what that meant. Long, empty road. No witnesses. Up ahead stood a girl no older than 20, wearing a yellow jacket and holding a cardboard sign that read, "Reno." Dorian slowed the van. Maribel looked at the girl through the windshield. "Too visible," she murmured. The girl stepped closer to the road, hopeful. Dorian studied her for a moment, then drove past. In the side mirror, Maribel watched the girl shrink into the distance. "Why not?" she asked. "Too many cars behind us," Dorian said calmly. "Someone would remember." Maribel nodded. She trusted his judgment. Dorian believed something simple. The road itself chose the victims. 2 hours later, they found another one. A man stood alone near a gas station exit, tall and thin, carrying a military duffel bag. His beard was thick and untrimmed. The cardboard sign in his hand read, San Diego. Perfect. Dorian pulled over. The man introduced himself as Leonard Pike, a recently discharged soldier heading home. He climbed into the back of the camper van, grateful for the ride. Leonard talked a lot. About Vietnam. About the heat. About how strange it felt to be back in America. Dorian listened politely. Maribel watched him in the rear-view mirror. 40 minutes later, the van left the highway again. This time, Leonard noticed immediately. "Hey," he said from the back. "I thought we were heading south." Dorian's voice remained calm. "We are." The van rolled deeper into the desert hills. Leonard leaned forward, confused. That was when Maribel turned in her seat. In her hand was a heavy tire iron. Leonard didn't even have time to shout. They buried him beside the first. Dorian marked the place carefully in his notebook. Coordinates. Distance from the road. Depth. Maribel watched him work. "You like keeping records," she said. "It's important," Dorian replied. "For what?" He looked out across the empty desert. "For order." The killings continued quietly over the next year. A runaway from Oregon. A drifter from Texas. Another hitchhiker who told them he was heading to Los Angeles to start a band. Each time the same pattern. The green camper van. The empty highway. The turn off the road. The desert graves. By early 1976, 5 people had disappeared along the same stretch of highway. Still, no one connected the cases. But in a small sheriff's office in Eastern California, one detective had started to notice something strange. His name was Calvin Rourke, and he had just opened a folder that would slowly begin to link the missing travelers together. Part 3, A Pattern in the Dust. Detective Calvin Rourke had been working missing person cases for nearly 15 years. Most of them ended the same way. The trail went cold, the files collected dust, and eventually the families stopped calling. But something about these disappearances bothered him. 5 people, different states, different months, different backgrounds. Yet all of them had vanished along roughly the same corridor of highways stretching across eastern California and western Nevada. Rourke spread the case files across his desk in the small sheriff's office in Bishop, California. Each folder held the same frustrating details. Last seen hitchhiking. Destination uncertain. No witnesses after pickup. Normally that wouldn't mean much. Hitchhikers were hard to track. But one detail repeated itself in 3 of the witness statements. A vehicle, not a description of the driver. Not a license plate. Just a type. A light green camper van. Rourke leaned back in his chair, staring at the notes. Witness number 1, gas station attendant near Tonopah, said a hitchhiker left with a couple in a camper van. Witness number 2, truck driver outside Hawthorne, saw a young man get picked up by a similar vehicle. Witness number 3, waitress from a roadside diner, remembered a quiet married couple traveling in a camper. It wasn't proof, but it was something. Rourke circled the note on the paper. Green camper van. 200 miles south. The van itself was parked beside a small grocery store in Barstow. Dorian Hale carried a bag of supplies back toward the vehicle. Maribel sat inside with the windows open, smoking. "You took long," she said. "Lines were slow." Dorian placed the groceries behind the driver's seat. Canned food, water, road maps, routine supplies for people constantly on the road. Maribel watched him carefully. "You've been quieter lately," she said. Dorian shrugged. "The highways are busier." Maribel flicked ash out the window. "That never stopped you before." Dorian didn't answer, but the truth was simple. Something had changed. He had begun noticing police cruisers more often along the highways. Small sheriff patrols checking drivers. Occasional roadblocks. Not many, but enough. And Dorian Hale believed in patterns. Back in Bishop, Detective Rourke was building one of his own. He pinned a large map of California and Nevada on the wall above his desk. One by one, he marked each disappearance. 5 red pins. They formed a loose line along 2 major highways. Rourke stepped back and stared at the map. "Son of a bitch," he murmured, because now the pattern was obvious. Every victim had vanished within a 200-mile radius of the same desert region. And right in the middle of that region sat something most people had forgotten about: an abandoned mining district, miles of empty land. No towns, no witnesses. If someone wanted to hide bodies out there, Rourke grabbed his jacket. 3 days later, he drove a dusty sheriff's vehicle down a narrow desert road leading toward the old mines. Wind swept across the rocks. Sand moved slowly over the ground like drifting smoke. Rourke stepped out of the car and walked toward the hills. He didn't expect to find anything, but after 20 minutes of searching, something caught his eye, half buried in the sand near a cluster of stones. A small object. Rourke knelt and brushed away the dirt. It was a leather bracelet. Old, worn, exactly like the one described in the coroner's report from the body found months earlier. Rourke stood slowly, looking across the endless desert. Someone had been bringing people here, and suddenly the case felt very real. Somewhere out on the highways, a killer was still driving, and the only clue Rourke had was a simple description: a quiet couple and a green camper van. Part 4, the van. Detective Calvin Rourke spent the next 6 months chasing a vehicle that, on paper, barely existed. Green camper van wasn't much to work with. Thousands of them were registered across California and Nevada. Families used them for vacations. Retirees used them for long road trips. College kids borrowed them for summer travel. But Rourke believed something simple. If the same van kept appearing near missing hitchhikers, eventually it would appear somewhere it shouldn't. So he started calling other counties, small sheriff's offices, highway patrol stations, state police. Most of them had nothing. But in January 1977, a call came from a highway patrol officer near Bakersfield. The officer had stopped a couple weeks earlier to help a stalled vehicle on the roadside, a light green camper van. Rourke drove there the next morning. The patrol officer, Tom Grady, met him at the station. "Didn't seem strange at the time," Grady said, flipping through his notes. "Just a couple traveling south. Said they were heading toward Arizona. You get a name?" Rourke asked. Grady nodded. "Driver's license." He handed over a small report. Rourke read the name slowly. Dorian Hale. Passenger, Maribel Hale. Vehicle, 1968 Ford Econoline camper. Rourke felt the first real spark of certainty since the case began. "Where do they live?" he asked. Grady shrugged. "Nowhere permanent. License listed an address in Sacramento, but they said they travel most of the year." Travel most of the year. Exactly what Rourke feared. It took another 4 months to find them again. In May 1977, a sheriff's deputy outside Needles, California, spotted the camper van parked near a roadside diner. The deputy ran the plate. The name came back. Dorian Hale. Within 30 minutes, Detective Rourke was on the phone. "Do not lose that vehicle," he told him. The sun was setting when 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled quietly into the diner parking lot. Inside the camper van, Maribel noticed him first. She lowered her cigarette slowly. Dorian. He followed her gaze through the windshield. 2 patrol cars, parked too deliberately, watching. Dorian exhaled slowly. "Well," he said calmly, "that took longer than I expected." Maribel looked at him. "You think it's about the desert?" "Yes." "Then we should drive." "No," Dorian replied. He reached for the keys and turned off the engine. Running would only confirm it. Deputies approached carefully. "Sir, step out of the vehicle." Dorian obeyed without resistance. Maribel followed. They were calm, cooperative, almost polite. But Detective Rourke had learned something over the years. The quiet ones were often the worst. The first search of the camper van seemed ordinary. Clothes, camping supplies, food. But then one of the deputies opened a small storage compartment under the rear bench. Inside was a box. And inside the box were items that didn't belong to any married couple traveling the highways. A military dog tag, a yellow jacket, a leather bracelet. a wallet with no cash, but an ID card belonging to a missing college student from Oregon. Detective Rourke stared at the items silently. Then he looked at Dorian Hale. "You want to explain this?" Dorian met his eyes. "No," he said quietly. 2 days later, search teams returned to the abandoned mining district. This time they brought shovels. The desert gave up its secrets slowly. But by the end of the week, investigators had uncovered 6 shallow graves hidden among the rocks. Remains, clothing, personal belongings. Enough evidence to finally connect every missing hitchhiker. Back at the county jail, Maribel Hale said almost nothing during questioning. But Dorian spoke once. Only once. Detective Rourke asked him a single question. "Why them?" Dorian sat calmly across the metal table. Then he answered in a voice that sounded almost thoughtful. "They were already lost." He paused. "The road just finished the job." Part 5, The Trial. By the summer of 1978, the case of the Desert Highway murders had spread across newspapers throughout the United States. 6 victims. 6 shallow graves in the abandoned mining district between California and Nevada, and a married couple who had quietly driven America's highways while leaving bodies behind them. The trial of Dorian Hale and Maribel Ortega Hale began in San Bernardino County under intense public attention. Families of the victims traveled from across the country to attend. For many of them, this was the first time they had learned exactly how their sons and daughters had died. The prosecution's case was devastating. Detective Calvin Rourke was the first major witness. Standing before the jury, he carefully explained how the investigation had developed. The missing hitchhikers, the witness reports of the green camper van, and the eventual discovery of the graves. Then the evidence was presented. A military dog tag belonging to Leonard Pike, the yellow jacket of a runaway girl from Oregon, the leather bracelet recovered in the desert. Each item had been found inside the camper van owned by Dorian Hale. Then came the photographs from the mining site. 6 burial locations. Human remains recovered beside pieces of clothing and personal belongings. A forensic specialist explained how the victims had suffered severe head trauma consistent with being struck by a heavy metal object. The same type of injury repeated in every case. The courtroom remained silent. The defense attempted a different strategy. Maribel Hale's attorney argued that she had been manipulated by her husband, a follower, not the planner, someone who had been too afraid to leave. But the prosecution presented witness testimony that challenged that claim. A truck driver who had seen Maribel driving the camper van alone with a hitchhiker weeks before one disappearance. Another witness who remembered her standing outside the vehicle while Dorian spoke to a traveler. Slowly, the image of a passive wife began to collapse. The jury saw something else. Partners. Dorian Hale himself showed little emotion throughout the trial. He listened calmly to every witness. He watched the photographs without looking away. At one point, a reporter noted in the newspaper that Hale appeared more like a bored accountant than a man accused of 6 murders. But on the 10th day of the trial, the judge allowed the prosecution to read a passage from Dorian's notebook. The notebook had been found hidden beneath the driver's seat of the camper van. Inside were handwritten entries, dates, locations, coordinates, each one matching the burial sites found in the desert. When the final page was read aloud, the courtroom grew completely still. One sentence was written beneath the last set of coordinates. Order restored. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Their verdict came late in the afternoon. Guilty on all counts. For Maribel Ortega Hale, the judge delivered a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Dorian Hale, the sentence was different. Under California law at the time, multiple counts of premeditated murder qualified for the ultimate punishment. The judge spoke slowly as he read the sentence. Dorian Hale, this court finds that your crimes demonstrate calculated cruelty and complete disregard for human life. He paused. You are hereby sentenced to death. Years later, investigators would still speak about the strange calmness of the man who had buried strangers in the desert. Detective Calvin Rourke once summarized the case in a single sentence during an interview. Most killers hide from the world, he said, but Dorian Hale drove straight through it. And for nearly 3 years, The endless American highways had helped him do it.